Oh boy, this is definitely going to be one heck of a doozy, isn't it? Welcome back to the channel, everybody. It's me, NeosGamer04, or for some of you who know me outside of Wattpad, NeoCyber. Now today we're going to be looking at one particular movie. But it's not just any movie. The movie we'll be looking at today is none other than Shin Godzilla. Now, for any of you who don't know about the Shin Godzilla movie, Shin Godzilla is basically like a retelling or reboot, in a sense, of the original 1954 Godzilla, but done in modern times and has a lot of things that are different about it this time around. Such as a change in the character's origins, and obviously the design and what it is meant to be representing. However, I will not be discussing this alone. In fact, I brought a friend of mine along. Now, this good friend of mine you might have heard of, or if any of you have noticed about the updates about a story that me and him are making for Wattpad called Resurgence, you might know him. And if you've ever heard of the Godzilla NES Wattpad series, such as the first book, NES Godzilla Travel Through the World, then you might know who I'm talking about. Everybody, please welcome Reader Godzilla, or as he's known on YouTube, GodzillaReader. He's the one who'll be helping out with me on, helping me out on this video discussing one particular topic about this movie, and that is, how well does this movie still stand today? Is it a masterpiece, as everyone claims it to be, or is it a dumpster fire, or is the movie great but very flawed? Let's find out, shall we?
Hello everybody, I'm the Godzilla Reader, and today, like my good friend Neos Gamer said, we're going to take a look and see if Shin Godzilla really is the big masterpiece that everyone keeps saying, as well as see if it's on the same level as the original Godzilla. Now, I can already tell that there's probably going to be a lot of people who are going to be so pissed over the fact that we're criticizing a movie that is apparently so perfect that it deserves to be a masterpiece. To that I say, not everyone is going to like this movie. And also, I'm pretty certain that we are allowed to have a different opinion. So please, calm down there in the comments. Okay? Okay.
First things first, before we dig into the meat and potatoes of this movie, the first things we need to go over is, of course, the plot and the themes of this movie. Now, as for the plot of the movie, it is mostly just about the same as the original Godzilla, although the difference is that this one has more of a heavier focus on the Japanese government's perspective in this film. And it's also about them witnessing a creature that has risen above the depths of the ocean that is now attacking Japan. Except this creature also seems to be mutating into different forms, which, of course, leads into the main form that he has for this movie, which is, well, Shin Godzilla. And with how the themes of this movie are, now, the themes of this film is more based off of, at least from what disaster the themes take from, is more similar and more based off of a magnitude 9 earthquake, which then turned into a tsunami in Japan a few years prior to the movie's creation and release. As for the original Godzilla, in comparison, the original Godzilla movie was based more off of what happened in World War II in Japan, specifically with the atomic bomb. And the way the film uses that theme is it does present the kind of destruction that something with that much power can do. And also how it can also affect the people who are either were there that were nearby it, or people that were close to them that they cared about that unfortunately got affected by it.
In the original Godzilla, the themes were about the disaster of the nuclear explosion, which was what Godzilla was meant to represent, and the way it was executed was done so well. The movie shows you how horrifying it was when Godzilla was causing destruction, and when you see all these innocent people die, it's a tragedy. But in Shin Godzilla, you don't get that. In fact, Godzilla barely does any destruction, except when he is in his fourth form, but he doesn't kill anyone. Actually, scratch that. There are some deaths, but here's the problem. No one cares. Like, innocent civilians are getting killed, no one cares. There's no tragedy over that. And if I'm being honest, that's poor execution to what the themes were meant to be about. Actually, there is one death that has made a huge impact on the characters, and that's the death of the Prime Minister. A character who we barely know about and we seriously do not care. Really? That's what made a huge impact and not the deaths of the civilians? Okay then. Speaking of characters, perhaps we should move on to the next topic.
Now, as for the characters of this movie, what do I have to say? In my honest opinion, after looking back at this movie, the characters of this movie are probably some of the most forgettable ones that I have ever seen. Heck, I can hardly remember any of the characters by name. Like, other than maybe the Prime Minister, like Reader said, even though he wasn't really that important and they made it seem like he was important, but they didn't really give us any information about him for us to even really care about his character. And honestly, none of them even seem to. In fact, none of the characters even seem like they care about the situation going on. They all just feel like blank slates. The best comparison I could probably give to them, and I feel like people are gonna hate me for this, but the protagonist of Grand Theft Auto 3, Claude Speed. Because the character of that game is basically like these characters, even though he's a silent protagonist, and these characters do have emotions and speak, the difference, there isn't too much of a difference here, except for the fact that Claude is basically nothing but just, at least by how he's written, he's just mostly just a shell for the player to use, like a lifeless shell for the characters to use, well, the players to use in order to play throughout the story of the game, while the characters in this movie, there's not too much to how they are either. They do have emotions and they do actually speak, but the thing is, they just seem completely apathetic about everything during the course of this entire film. At least, they seem apathetic when it comes to the circumstances of like the civilians and everything else. If anything, they seem very selfish about their own goals throughout this film instead of trying to protect everyone else. And to make matters worse, there isn't really anything about the characters that really drives anybody to really like them that much, or really have any sort of attachment or feel like they have like some sort of like they could relate to them, like they feel like these characters are also ourselves. There isn't anything like that. The thing that a story is supposed to do is also, at least, not all characters are meant to be like this, but for some, especially if they're your main characters, there needs to also be something that drives like a little bit of a relatability factor, or at least, if not that, at least something about the character where you actually see the way they are, their struggles, and everything else that would at least give you a little bit of a chance that will actually make you care for them.
Now, I know a lot of people are going to say, oh, but the characters in Godzilla 2014 are even more forgettable. At least in Godzilla 2014, the movie shows you who these characters are. In Shin Godzilla, it doesn't show you who these characters are or why you should even give a crap about them. And apart from being forgettable, they're not even good characters at all. Like, people are dying from Godzilla's attack and they don't care about it. I'm being serious. These people don't give a crap about the civilians who are dying. They seem to care more about the city and the resource, but not the civilians. What kind of sick people are you? Now I know people are going to say, oh well, that's part of the response about how the Japanese government failed to act in a time of crisis. That doesn't change anything. And besides, I'm watching a movie, not a documentary, so yeah, these characters are still terrible. When it comes to the music, there's actually nothing wrong about the music. In fact, the music is actually pretty good. And the fact that they reused some of the older tracks from previous movies is actually kinda brilliant. However, there's still a little bit of issue when it comes to the music, and that will have to be seen with the two songs, Persecution of the Masses and Who Will Know. When listening to the song Persecution of the Masses, the song really gives off that feeling of hopelessness, and that there's nothing that we can do. And the first time the song plays is when Godzilla makes first appearance in land in his second form, chasing down the civilians who are running away for their lives. Now here, it clearly works. It really does give off that dramatic feel. However, that dramatic feel proceeds to be ruined when we now cut to the characters. What the characters are doing is just interpreting the Japanese constitution, and that does not even give off a dramatic feel. The song does not work here. It doesn't fit and doesn't give it anything dramatic at all. And the worst part is that the song just keeps playing on the characters and not Godzilla himself, which makes me question what was the point of the song if it doesn't even play on Godzilla causing destruction, but the characters trying to figure out how to stop him. It's completely pointless. Heck, the song doesn't even play when Godzilla is in his fourth form, the only time where he does more than in his other forms. It's just so disappointing and pointless.
Now, as for the case with the next song, which is of course Who Will Know, as the name of the song suggests, it gives off a feeling of uncertainty and also tragedy. And for when this song is used throughout the movie, it actually does give off that kind of feeling, especially when seeing the wave of destruction that Godzilla has caused. And actually gives you that kind of feeling like, what is going to happen to us? How are we going to pull through this? And are we even going to survive this at all? Or is Godzilla going to be the one who destroys us all before we even have a chance to prevail? Now, here's the one thing that's actually the main problem about the song, and the thing is, While yes, it is a good song and it actually does deliver on the theme and message that it's giving, if you listen to the lyrics close enough, it is actually supposed to be relating to the main character himself, Godzilla, the title character. And the way it's supposed to be relating to him is that it's actually supposed to be relating to how he's actually feeling. Like how he's been feeling throughout the entire movie, especially every time he transforms. Except the problem is, even though he does, the song tells us about his emotions on this, you don't exactly see too much of what his actual emotions are to really get it from his body language or anything else. I think it's about time that we go on to the next topic, which is about the way the G-Man is characterized himself within this movie.
Now, when it comes to Godzilla himself, now, I'm gonna be honest here. I do not hate this Godzilla. In fact, I think that this Godzilla is by far the best, if not the greatest, interpretation of the character. Just from the design, the abilities, and the concept, Toho really managed to do something new, different, and unique, but also not missing the point of who Godzilla really is. Until they screw that up with their next installment, but we're not talking about that. What I'm saying is that Toho really managed to do something unique with Godzilla. Not to say that the other Godzillas from the past eras were bad, they were awesome, but Shin really takes the whole like unique and different into a new level. However, there's still one problem that I have with Shin Godzilla. The portrayal and the lack of personality. So apparently, Shin Godzilla was meant to be a creature that is suffering from him constantly mutating and he wants to die. However, the movie really doesn't show you that. In fact, Godzilla in this movie is pretty lifeless, and he really doesn't do all much. All he does is just walk forward. And he really, again, he's so lifeless, he doesn't show any sign of personality, which honestly is a bit weird because it doesn't really feel like he doesn't really feel like he's part of the movie, like he's a character in the movie. He's just there just to be there. Now granted, that could be a way to show how Godzilla is scary, which, not gonna lie, does work. However, the thing that ruins that is his purpose. Like I said, Godzilla is a creature that is suffering from him constantly mutating and he wants to die. And another detail about that is that he's also asking for help. What? Yes, you heard me right. Godzilla, king of the monsters and god of destruction, is literally pleading for help, asking someone to help him because of his condition. Which, if I'm being honest, is a bit out of character because I'm pretty certain Godzilla doesn't give a damn about the humans, and if he's suffering from this type of like condition, he wouldn't be asking for him. He would be literally killing those who pretty much forced him to have that. This information could be found in Who Will Know if you're able to understand the lyrics. However, here's another problem. Who Will Know is played during the moment where Godzilla is destroying a city. Like he's showing his abilities while completely destroying a city. So apparently this song is supposed to tell you that he's suffering, but at the same time it's playing during when he's destroying a city, which, if I'm being honest, doesn't really work that well. And also, the movie breaks one of the most important rules in filmmaking: show, don't tell.
He just immediately breaks this rule the moment that they have it so that the song is the only thing that really tells us about how Godzilla is feeling. The fact that he's mostly just feeling a lot of pain and suffering and just wants somebody to try to help him escape his misery. Now, it would have been better if they actually gave us if they actually showed Godzilla feeling this pain. And here's the thing. Before watching the movie, or at least after I watched the movie and when I've seen some scenes of it, I actually never knew Godzilla was actually feeling pain throughout the movie. Even though some instances probably would give you the idea, or at least the song kind of would. The thing is, apparently, from another friend of mine, they told me that apparently, whenever Godzilla roars in this movie, apparently that's meant to signify that whenever he roars in the movie, that he is basically feeling pain, which, I mean, I guess that kind of works, but at the same time, it's like, I find it odd that that's the way how they're supposed to express it, if that is actually true. Because last time I checked, Godzilla's roar is probably the most iconic thing about him other than his atomic breath and his design. I mean, majority of the time when he's in movies, when he roars, he usually does it either if he's angry or happy or showing that he might have got a victory and triumph. It doesn't really insinuate that he's feeling pain. I mean, he does roar sometimes when he is feeling pain, but that's usually in a fight and he might growl as well, but the roar isn't only used for that. So the fact that the one thing that's basically one of the most iconic things about the character is meant to signify that he's feeling pain, I don't know, man. It just kind of sounds odd. Like, if that is their intention, then okay, I mean, it's not a terrible thing, but it's kind of odd considering that it's the most iconic thing. Of course, other than the atomic breath and design. And the fact that it does play over, that the Who Will Know theme plays over the scene where he's basically destroying a city, doesn't make any sense. Like, last time I checked, Godzilla was mostly a beast of destruction. Like, one of the versions of Godzilla that probably is the best example of one that is a beast of destruction is the one from GMK. I mean, even though he is possessed, he still kind of represents that kind of tone and feeling of how Godzilla is supposed to be. A being that towers over everybody, who he's not always seeking chaos and destruction, but this specific one is. Either that or vengeance against the people who may have wronged him. Which you would think, if this is the case, that the Shin Godzilla is feeling a lot of agony now. Every time he transforms, you'd think he would go after whoever it was that was responsible for mutating him. However, you never actually see this. You would think you would if this is actually true about his actual feelings, but the film never shows it. Not once do. And they don't hint at who would have done it either. So that's kind of one glaring problem when it comes to saying what Godzilla's true feelings throughout the movie is, when you don't really show us. The best example I could say for a time that might, or some examples I could say that might show examples of Godzilla's emotions through body language is, of course, through Godzilla vs. Destroyer, because in that point, that's basically a time where he would have basically been feeling agony because he was basically a ticking time bomb in that film. But he wasn't completely emotionless, but you could tell that he probably knew that however long he was going to keep all of that radiation in, whenever it was time to release it, it was going to be his last day. Like, it was going to be the last time he might ever be around. And also including when his son, Godzilla Jr., also got hurt within the final battle of the movie, you could tell he did actually feel bad about what happened to his son and did want to fight for him. Now, Godzilla didn't really win the fight, but still, it did show how he was feeling. And of course, in Godzilla vs. Kong, he did actually kind of taunt Kong when they were fighting in Hong Kong. Especially that one moment in the film during that when he kind of laughed at him, and then, of course, but the roar that both of them had near the end of the scene, which was meant to show that Godzilla was trying to tell Kong to basically to throw in the towel. However, considering that Kong retaliated and roared back at him, that tells us that Kong was having none of that, and Godzilla actually, instead of him deciding to kill Kong like some would have thought he would, he instead would have left him alive out of respect, but at the same time would basically be leaving him to die there, of course, until they would have had to team up to the end of the movie against Mechagodzilla. And another example of something, another show that's like presents show but don't tell, that goes by that rule, is Samurai Jack. I mean, even though this series is not Godzilla related, this is probably a proper example of show don't tell, at least seasons 1 through 4. Even though there is dialogue in the show, there actually isn't a lot. Through most of the episodes, characters, specifically Jack himself, doesn't talk a lot. And most of the time, even though they do tell you about what happens throughout the story, the visuals is the thing that actually tells you more about what's going on than the characters do. You actually see what's going on, and you get to form the conclusion yourself and figure out what's going on without having the characters just tell you straight away without you really getting a chance to see it or care. That's one problem that Shin Godzilla, at least when it comes to Godzilla's feelings, unfortunately does not capture too well. At least, in my opinion, it doesn't. It could have done it better, but unfortunately that's just the way it is. Now that we're finally in the conclusion stages, here's the time to finally answer the big question. How well has Shin Godzilla held up in recent years after the original release? Well, after everything that me and Godzilla Reader have gone over, for my final conclusion on the movie, I would say the film is not a masterpiece as many consider it to be. However, it is a decent film, a decent Godzilla movie, but is very flawed in multiple areas. As its own, it stands as a pretty good movie, but a very flawed one. But as a reboot to the 1954 Godzilla, not so much. I mean, it's decent, but not so much when it's going over the source material and actually trying to pay respects to it. When it is, I mean, in terms of the music, it does, and in terms of the ideas they had for Godzilla, but making it new and unique, and this is probably the most unique iteration of Godzilla in recent years, I'd say they did a good job with that, but other than that, they kind of screwed up in a lot of areas. They didn't really give you any reason to care about the characters in the story at all, and Godzilla, for the most part, throughout this movie, has just kind of barely had any emotion and is mostly just treated as a force of destruction, but your typical one, instead of it just being one that actually has emotion that's an actual character, and he's just treated like, for the most part, kind of like a natural disaster, which, funny enough though, both versions of Godzilla are based around, but still. And after seeing how some of the properties for Godzilla afterwards, such as the Godzilla anime trilogy and Singular Point, the anime trilogy, well, we all know about that one, so I don't think we really need to say too much about how that one went. Oh boy. And as for Singular Point, I would say, to me, it's a good anime, it's a good Godzilla anime, but it gets very convoluted in a lot of places. But if I had to pick which cast of characters from like Toho's recent stuff that I enjoy more, I'd say it's probably the ones from Singular Point more than the ones from Shin Godzilla or the anime trilogy. The Singular Point characters just seem more memorable to me, especially Palo. However, one thing I am there too, hopefully, if Godzilla stays, but Toho wanted to remove him from there. It's been said that after Godzilla vs. Kong that they were gonna remove him, so there's no telling of if he actually will be taken away and what's gonna happen once they do, but considering Toho's recent track record with most of their stuff in relation to Godzilla, I'm not too sure. Because
being a Godzilla fan for about 9 years now, I think this movie was a huge disappointment. It was badly executed on what it was based on, and it was a failure that did not understand what made the original movie so good. And honestly, that's just unfortunate. There was a time where I actually liked this movie, but after seeing what Toho did, especially in Godzilla Singular Point, where they reused the same concept but did it even worse, I think this was where I started to get a new opinion. Because it looked like Toho was milking the success of Shin, and that does not give up a good sign. Now, regarding the future of the Godzilla Resurgence era, I don't know what to say. Toho, like, this attempt of trying to make something new, I mean, apart from Shin being the only one that succeeded on that, the rest was a huge failure on trying to be new and different, apparently. The Godzilla anime trilogy was a huge garbage that tried to be new but had some of the dumbest ideas that I've ever seen, which made it a freaking disaster. And Godzilla Singular Point, despite being pretty okay, suffers from a lot of problems, and again, it reuses the same idea that Shin Godzilla had, which, why? But all honestly, I don't know what to say. Especially since I don't think Toho really seems to care about the fans, and it looks like they seem to care more about the money, because of course, I mean, they reused the same idea in Godzilla's Singular Point, so I don't know. But honestly, I don't know. I feel like Toho really doesn't know how to do something new with Godzilla anymore. And quite frankly, that's unfortunate, because they make me want to watch more of the Monsterverse than what they're doing. The thing that I love about the Monsterverse is that the Monsterverse didn't need it to be new and different. It needed to be entertaining. And besides, the people who work in the Monsterverse clearly respected the kaiju more than Toho themselves. But honestly, I don't know what to say more. Toho, please, try to do something new. Stop milking the success of Shin and stop using the same concept, because I don't think it will come out as good. But please, try something different. But yeah, that's all I have to say about that. I'm the Godzilla Reader, and it was a pleasure being here. Bye bye!
And there you have it. I would like to give a special thanks to Godzilla Reader for joining me on this one. And I would like it, if you guys don't mind, if you could go check out his channel and maybe check out to see what his content is like and if you might like his videos. And maybe even give him a subscribe. Like, give him some subs and hit the subscribe button for him, if none of you mind. I'm just asking. I'm not gonna force you to do that, but I think he would really appreciate it if you guys did check out his channel. This is Neos Gamer signing out, and I wish to all of you true believers a good day. Excelsior. See ya.